Are you ready, Walter? Everybody, we will call the Talent City Council regular meeting of April 16th to order. Roll call, please.
Councilor Foley. Here. Councilor Penamara.
Here.
Councilor Medina.
Here.
Councilor Prestizo is absent. Councilor Byers.
Here.
Councilor Para Miller
Here.
and Mayor Ayers Flood.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Hector. Item number 2 is additions or corrections to the agenda. Staff?
Thank you, Mayor, and members of the council. The staff would request the addition of one item as the review of a price agreement with express employment professionals for weed abatements, seasonal workers.
All right, let's make that, this will be new business, so it will be item number 8.3.
Thank you.
Any other corrections or additions to the agenda? Item number 3 on the agenda is 3.1, reading of the proclamation in support of the Rogue Valley Food System Network. Do I have that on my desk here? Did it? Okay, no problem. I'll just read it off the agenda. I mean, off of my packet here. Oh, wait a minute. I've got the wrong packet open.
I also have the packet out here.
Yeah, Alex has got a copy of it. Thank you, Alex. I have just the agenda open. So this is the Rogue Valley Food System Network proclamation. Whereas the Rogue Valley has many attributes of a strong local food system, and whereas as a community, we still have work to do to ensure that everyone in our community has access to healthy food and that farms and food businesses can grow in our region. And whereas our community of individuals, businesses, organizations, agencies, and local government can do more when we work collaboratively. And whereas the City of Talent strives to support the well-being of our local farms, gardens, food businesses, and community members. And whereas the City of Talent supports the Rogue Valley Food System Network mission and the vision which states mission, the Rogue Valley Food System Network fosters connections to promote equitable food access, ecologically sound agricultural practices, and economic vitality. Vision: the Rogue Valley has a visible, engaged, and vibrant food system. Now, therefore, I, Darby Ayers Flood, Mayor of the City of Talent, do hereby proclaim that the City of Talent, a supporter of the Rogue Valley Food System Network, in an effort to strengthen our community's food system as a whole. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and hand that back to, and if you give me a second while I get on the full packet, I was just on the agenda. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. It seems like I go through this every time. All right, so the next item on the agenda is appointments. 5.1 is appointment of alternate member to Parks and Recreation
sorry.
Commission.
Did we do public testimony?
Oh,
Did I
no,
just
sorry.
miss it? Okay.
So do we have any speaker request forms?
We have one, it's near your computer towards the edge of the table, toward the top.
Where is it? Right here?
Yes, apologies for not marking it.
Okay, so we have a speaker request forms for Stuart Trivers. So at this time, Stuart, if you want to come forward and state your name and your city for the record, please.
Hello, my name is Stuart Trivers. I'm a Medford resident, although I live about 5 minutes down the road from here. My house is closer to Phoenix than Medford, and I spend more time in Talent than Phoenix. So I am here not representing anyone but myself, but I am here to speak about the Talent Food Pantry. I started volunteering with them about a year ago, maybe a little more, because it was when they were still in the town hall building before the fire. And I want to speak to first what an incredible group of people this is. We have people that have been obviously volunteering their time week after week, day after day, just because they want to feed people. They just want to make sure that everyone's got access to food. That's really the bottom line. There's no ulterior motives. There's no agendas. It's about making sure hungry people can, with dignity, get the food they need to feed their families. Treating people with care and dignity is a huge part of that kind of work. And it can be pretty nerve-wracking to do that for the first time. I used the Talent Food Pantry 15 years ago when I was living in a wall tent up Wagner Creek. And it was, it took a leap of faith to go utilize that service and realize that that's an okay thing to do. It helps a lot to have friendly, happy local people making that happen. Since the fires, they've been relegated to a small parking lot right outside this building to provide this volunteer service. And it's been, it hasn't been easy. You know, the weather is all over the place. It's Oregon, so we have stretches of 100-degree days or more. We have stretches of downpour. We had pretty unprecedented snow this year where we had volunteers with their own shovels and one gentleman that brought his own tractor to come clear snow so that we could set up community donated tents and pull stuff out of a community donated trailer so that these folks who all work a lot more than me, I set up, hopefully I'm part-time. I probably work the least out of all the volunteers. And these are older people working in these conditions. And they're doing the job diligently. And there's been a ray of hope with this community center coming up that we're gonna have a place to operate out of, and a building and air conditioning and a place to get water and use a bathroom for the clients. People don't have access to water or bathrooms a lot of the time when we're serving them out in the parking lot here. There's hardly any seating to go around. We can only fit so many benches and seats in the small trailer we have for storage. And so I'm here to make sure that these people are shown their due gratitude and respect, mostly in the council's effort to make sure that they can be considered as the loyal servants of the community that they are for tenants in this new community space. I think that everything I've just said is more than enough reason that they should be getting high praise and a strong effort to make sure that they can at least have a chance to be fulfilling this role in the same great capacity that they've been doing. I understand there's been a lot of shifting the narrative around, well, rent costs and who can we ask to do that, and the water bill. First of all, I think the numbers on this have been a little misleading based on the council's estimates they put together and the square footage costs of the space and what we know that the food pantry needs. It's a paltry amount of money for a town with a budget of $24 million. It's the least we could do to get the last, little push to make sure these people can keep providing the service. And people may not agree with that. I think it's really important that the city itself at least comes up with a cost estimate and a few options of how we could fund this program, to let the people of the city decide whether they want to kick these people to the curb and tell them, hopefully come back and volunteer with whoever else we get in here. I don't personally know of groups that are lining up to give out free food and pay rent and not pay their workers. It's hard to find people to volunteer, and it's hard to find groups that do it this well, this consistently. So I don't see any good reason why we shouldn't be doing everything in our power to support these people to continue to do that work, when by and large, this grant was leveraged off of the need for this space, for this service. That's the bulk of my piece. I think that whether or not there are other entities that could be filling some or all of these services, there may be some overlap, or there might be some spots where this new service doesn't do what the Talent Food Pantry does. We have the Greenback program that has nothing to do with access as far as I know, and that provides all of the shelf-stable food Talent Food Pantry uses, and is provided by Talent residents pretty much exclusively. It's hand-delivered by Talent residents. Everyone working under this umbrella of the Talent Food Pantry that's been swept under the rug a little bit because they're not an official organization. We respect each other and the leadership that we work under, which is at this moment Tammy Wilder as the volunteer manager. It's an incredible job. She's given so much of her time and love to this community, and I'd like to see her continue to head up this effort under the name of the talent manager. Thank you.
Thank you. I let it go a little bit longer because it was the only speaker request form.
Oh, that is correct, although Tammy Wilder did submit some public testimony.
Yeah. It's on the record.
Okay,
right?
thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. All right, are there any other speaker request forms?
There are no additional speaker requests. forms.
Okay, thank you, Hector. So the next item on the agenda is 5.1. Appointment of alternate member to Parks and Recreation Commission. Counselor Penamarav?
Yeah, I'd like to move to postpone this item until the next meeting. I think I have some follow-up questions for the applicant. And I'd like to have those questions answered prior to the vote.
Okay,
Do you want to?
Is there- before I entertain a motion, is there any other comments on this item? All right, I'll entertain a motion. Counselor Penamarav?
I move to postpone item 5.1 to the next regular meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to postpone 5.1 to the next council meeting. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Roll call.
Oh, gosh. Roll call?
Counselor Coley. Yes. Counselor Penamara,
Yeah.
Counselor Medina,
Yes.
Counselor Byers,
Yes.
and Counselor Prime Miller.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mayor.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 5.2, appointment of the alternate member to Public Arts Committee. Any comments or questions about that? Counselor Perry Miller?
Just that TPAC was able to meet with and interview Kathleen, and they were really excited to have her vast amount of event planning experience from her very interesting past from many states, including Oregon. Anyways, so they're super excited to be able to recommend her for that position, and that will make it a full committee.
All right, so with that, I'll entertain a motion. Counselor Perry Miller?
I'm still getting used to having appointments
Yeah,
separate,
this is,
sorry.
The new agenda will take a little while to.
Yeah. So I move to affirm the mayoral appointment of Kathleen Baker as an alternate member to the Talent Public Arts Committee for a 2-year term beginning April 16th, 2025.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to affirm the appointment of Kathleen Baker as the alternate member of the Public Arts Committee. And did you add the term? Did I hear you add the term?
It's in there, April 16th,
I
2025.
know. but I'm
Oh,
talking about
2-year
the-
term, yeah.
For a 2-year term. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Coley. Yes. Counselor Penamara,
Yeah.
Counselor Medina,
Yeah.
Counselor Byers,
Yes.
and Counselor Prime Miller.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mayor.
Thank you, Hector. Next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Is there anything on the consent calendar that anybody wants to pull out for discussion? Seeing none, are there any comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor,
Counselor Perry Miller?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Coley. Yes. Counselor Penamara,
Yes.
Counselor Medina,
Yes.
Counselor Byers,
Yes.
and Counselor Prime Miller.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mayor.
Thank you, Hector. Next item on the agenda is unfinished business 7.1, discussion and approval of the Talent Community Resource Center tenant selection process. Staff report?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. First, I'd like to acknowledge the written communication that was mentioned earlier. There's a petition that Tammy Wilder submitted with 94 signatures, 68 of whom are apparently town residents. And similar sentiment as was provided in the oral testimony tonight. That encouraging the city to consider not prioritizing cost recovery from a food pantry operator. With that, I'd be happy to, I think what I should do is focus on the changes to this document as opposed to what you saw last time. And that is chiefly that the requirements and decision factors were split, rather than just one list, it was divided into two different lists. And those lists, the first is for regular, in quotes, full-time tenants. And that is very similar, if not identical, to the list that was presented last time. And then the second is for food providers. And that is a shorter list. The minimum requirement would be that they are provide food to area residents, regardless of the recipient's ability to pay. High priority decision factors would be can provide contribution to cost of operation and maintenance of the building and a record of financial stability. And other decision factors, the secondary ones proposed, would be interested in supporting their building's use as a resiliency hub, and the organization has paid staff with whom city can maintain regular communications. And I think I'll stop there because I think those are the only real substantive changes since the last time we discussed this.
Mayor,
Council Perry Miller,
before we go forward, I have to declare potential conflict.
Council Perry Miller.
So sorry, I feel like I keep doing this all the time, but it's important. So I do need to declare a potential conflict of interest for this agenda item. This is because I'm a paid employee of the Talent Business Alliance, which is a local nonprofit, as you all know, that leases office space from the City of Talent, currently in the community center, but previously in Old Town Hall. So even though TBA has very specifically indicated no desire in moving to the resource center, I do think it's important because we're a nonprofit, a local nonprofit listed in this staff report. It's important to make this declaration for the record. So it is a potential conflict, and I do plan to deliberate and vote on this, but just for the record.
Councilor Medina.
Would it be a potential conflict that I am currently using the food bank?
No, 'cause you
Okay.
don't have any financial gain from that, right?
No.
I'll check. I'm sorry. It's not to me to answer you. Dave?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I am a current client at the Talent Food Bank.
Is that a potential?
Is that a potential conflict of interest?
You're a client?
Yeah,
of-
so I go and get food because I need food.
I don't see that that's a potential conflict.
Okay.
Councilor Penamara.
I just want to, I think that because that's something that's open to everybody,
Mhm.
that's why it's not.
Right.
It wouldn't be a potential conflict. Yeah.
And I also will declare a potential conflict of interest. I am an employee of the Talent Business Alliance. And while we have declined an offer to utilize the Community Resource Center and asked to be provided our previous offices, which we spent an extensive budget on to remodel and want to go back there. It's a good location for us. We circumstances could arise where that might change. So for that reason, as a potential conflict of interest, I will still preside and deliberate. And if the vote were split, I would vote.
Mayor, just really quickly, just to be clear, TBA was never offered a space in the resource center.
Right.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure for the record that
Yeah,
that was not
but
something that
for
was
the record,
implied.
we sent in an email saying, we preemptively sent in an email saying that we did not, right? Thank you for
Yeah.
that clarification. All right. So with that, I'll entertain any comments or questions about the staff report. Counselor Medina.
I really think that we need to take out of the high priority decision factors that can provide contribution to cost of operation and maintenance of the building. I believe it'll really limit the organizations that can apply to provide a food bank pantry and talent, and that's the last thing we want.
I just want to add a couple comments myself. I've had an opportunity to have a lot of conversations with folks and, even though I feel very strongly that when we all decided to submit this grant, we did it with the caveat that, all occupants would participate in, the costs of the building. And we didn't make any exceptions for anybody at that time. That's not to say, though, that, that's set in stone and it can't change. So with that, so after us having some conversations, I don't disagree that that food pantry could have the exception. I just would add that if we were to do that, I would ask the council to consider like opening that opportunity up for any food pantry. And while I agree there isn't, I don't think I agree that there isn't further opportunities to expand on the program, especially in light of the Rogue Valley Food Network Systems assessment plan. I think there's a great opportunity, and if we're really looking out for the recipients, being able to expand and broaden those programs really is in the best interest of people that are receiving the food. So I just would say that if we're going to ask all of the other spaces to kind of carry the space of the food storage area and the common room, that I would hope we write it in such a way that the common area is available to all of the occupants of the building, all the people that are paying into that, and that the food pantry area would be, the storage area would be made available in a way that could allow shared use. And that any occupant that's in the resource center that is there with an exception to shared cost, that if they wanted to open offices or have extended stay, that they would be offered an opportunity to rent one of the offices. So equal access, I guess, is what I'm suggesting. I mean, Access has said that they are going to participate no matter who's in there. So I don't think there has ever been a threat that there wouldn't be a program. I think that's kind of not accurate information. But it does offer us an opportunity to expand these food programs with other participation if we open up the equal opportunity for other programs. And not make one occupancy exclusive to others, is I guess my point. Councilor Byers and then Councilor Medina.
Yeah, so my thoughts to that is we are very lucky to have a talent-based organization that is entirely volunteer run. And what they do is deeply important in our community. And also, I would never expect an all volunteer run organization to work to have food distribution available every single day or even every other day. That would be a massive ask on volunteer time. So I think having the potential to have multiple organizations providing food out of that space, my request would be that they're on different days, because we also have people, perhaps they're working in the window when the current food pantry is operating, which is understandable, and that's not anyone's fault. I think it would actually be increasing accessibility to food to be able to have that space open and providing resources to the public more days out of the week than not, if possible. That would be my hope with that. And that would include inviting Rogue Food Unites to consider doing their distribution in the parking lot there as well, just so that it continues to be a space that is regularly used. And to our speaker earlier, as I think about like access to bathrooms and water, how wonderful for people who are attending the Rogue Food Unites distribution to be able to have access to things like that as well.
Yeah, and just a quick question on your comments. So if Rogue Food Unites wanted to come in and distribute from inside, would you allow for that or?
If it didn't conflict with another date and they fill the other requirements, but, or if they just want to use the parking lot, like, I don't think we should overlook the utility of the parking lot if they feel like if there is an organization who feels like they just need the space to do it in space for people to park or be near a bus line or attend, I think all of that is something to consider as we put together what is the most effective use of every day that the space could be used, not just the square footage.
Agreed. And I just want to, it's one more clarifying point, because there are other organizations that are interested in that shared space. So are we, do you have that same understanding?
I was unaware that there were, like, specifically, it made sense to hold that open, but my request would be, food pantry has a set day of the week that they do distributions. I wouldn't want to throw off their schedule. So are they available to do distributions on a different day of the week? That would be my question.
Or if they just stayed with if they wanted to stay with the time, I mean, with the day that they do it. You would just schedule around that.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Counselor
I
Medina?
think that kind of answered my question, but you were talking about like shared space and shared storage, so I was gonna ask you like how you envision that. So I'm more of a concrete person, but that makes sense, whatever we decide, I mean, the more people who can provide food to this community, the better, right? But like whatever we decide, I would ask that it doesn't interfere with like whoever the pantry is, if that makes sense, because with the grant, we did get it based off of we are gonna have a food pantry, so like, you know. Like that's just one thing, kind of like what you were saying, like if I'm saying the same thing. If like that, you know, go around the hours of the pantry and, you know, yeah.
I just want to say for the record, though, for a lot of reasons, it wasn't that we wrote the grant for the food pantry. So we have that's an important clarification in terms of like utilization of the space. It was for the purpose of food distribution. So, and that exclusion that broader definition, I think, is important moving forward.
Thank you. When I said food pantry, I was thinking of like multiple organizations.
Yeah.
To do food pantry, not just a town food pantry.
A pantry
Thank you.
space, yeah,
Pantry
and telling, yeah,
space,
yeah,
thank
okay. Counselor Colleen?
Yeah, I'm generally supportive of all the ideas that have been discussed. Just thinking about the logistics of the other tenants that'll be there. Do we want to put it then into the minimum requirements or possible minimum requirements for the other tenants? Like right now, it says that they're compatible with it, with the use of the building for food pantry and food distribution, but it sounds like they're going to need to cover the cost of that portion of the building, or how is that going to be factored into the other tenants in that building as far as the selection process goes?
Alex?
Thank you for the question, and it gives me an opportunity to first clear up an error of mine with apologies. When I was cleaning up the minimum requirements, I entirely eliminated the cost contribution from the regular tenant. So one of the last time and intended to be this time, the minimum requirement of the regular full-time tenant would be that they provide a contribution to the cost of operation of the building. And then to address your question directly, Counselor, the short answer is yes. The slightly longer, yes, that we would be looking to the regular tenants to cover the overall operations and maintenance costs of the building. The slightly longer answer being there is the primary subsidy to the building is the grant. So the purchase of the building and that subsidy is being shared by all of the tenants. So I think the net effect on the paying tenants is that their subsidy is reduced by the need to contribute to the other space. So I think you can think about it either way, but I think the way I would prefer to think about it is they're not getting subsidized as much as they would if all of the tenants were paying. But I think
That makes sense to me.
Counselor Byers?
Do we have any idea of a rough estimate on the triple net that we were discussing as opposed for paying rent and triple net?
So is your question more about what those costs would be on this building? We've started, I don't have a dollar figure to share with you. Tesla's done an estimate and then I got, some costs from Asante as well. I was hoping to lay out that cost structure here, but I didn't get there. The utilities are a large portion of it.
Do we have, it's a follow-up.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea of the average cost of utilities from the last year or two of when it was in? operation?
Yes, we have those records from Asante.
I also want to mention, I'm sorry, were you done? Did you have a follow-up?
I'm still forming the question.
Okay. Based on a financial report that we had received during the town hall occupancy, the other, or after town hall occupancy, I just can't remember the timing. The other expense is building in the management, whether that is staff capacity or hiring in a managing company. I know at one point in time, one of the city managers used a commercial management company just because of the capacity issue. So it would be, that would be a cost that's factored in as well. And then I have one more piece to that. I believe that the food pantry, I'm fairly certain that the food pantry has shelf stable food. And so I would hope that we would use some of the remodeling funds to design the food storage in a way where they can secure the things that they want to secure. And then someone else could secure the things that they wanted to secure, whatever that ended up looking like. I don't know what square footage that actually needs, but I do, there are designs of shared spaces like that, so I don't think it'll be a big stretch to figure that out, but just some areas where some things can be secured, I think would be a good use of those funds. Anything else? Council Collet?
Yeah, you just jogged my memory a little bit. Has there been any discussion of installation or the need to install refrigerated food storage space, or would the assumption right now be that whoever's providing food out of there, it would be shelf stable food?
It's a great question. And my understanding of the food pantry has evolved. If Access is operating the food pantry, their preference certainly is to have refrigeration. They provide dairy and a sort of full range of food stuffs. So yes, they would certainly want that.
And I guess my follow-up to that is this, as the rough plan is drawn right now in our packet, is that multi-purpose room that is slated for, or the food, there's, I guess, a food storage room and then a multi-purpose room. Is that enough space? If somebody wanted to do refrigeration, would they need to take over one of the small offices or?
Thank you. Counselor, I'm not sure, my thought is that this is a rough sketch that's going to need to be revisited once we figure out who wants to be in the space and what their needs are. And while I'm speaking, just want to make sure that I complete my answer to Councilor Byers, and that is, I certainly expect to include a cost structure in the advertisement of this space. I wouldn't expect people to express their interest without understanding what the cost structure would be.
Councilor Byers?
Well, to that point, I would love to have a better understanding of what it would be even before advertising for that space so that we can speak about it with a bit more certainty when we say it would be. In my mind, having run a nonprofit that has rented an office space, it wasn't a wildly expensive office space, but it also was expensive for the nonprofit. And that included rent and all utilities and that sort of thing. So I would absolutely be curious to be able to compare the going rate for other office spaces versus what it would be per square footage for just triple net. I am very curious to see what that offset of cost is and what that equals.
Mhm. Mhm.
Any other questions or comments? Counselor Penamara?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. As far as I appreciate all the rich analysis on who pays for what. And I just want to say, for me, the bottom line is that the city does not lose money on this, that the city breaks even. And I feel like that's our contribution. Also, I think, you know, there's a lot of deference given there's something in the criteria of the current city tenants. The bottom line for me is what serves our community best, the best end result for the recipients of the service, whatever it is. And then thirdly, I'm wondering if we have the criteria, there is something about opportunities for efficiency, complementary with other possible users. I'm thinking of a criteria of play well with others kind of thing, being accommodating to the other tenants. I think that's it's hard to pin that down, but I think that's something that will contribute to the success of this venture. And I don't know if it's something that you're comfortable putting into words, but it's something that if I were doing that analysis, I would be looking for.
Counselor Collet?
I mean, I don't necessarily know how you put this into a criteria, but it could be part of an interview process or whatever, but prioritizing organizations that prioritize good partnerships, and not necessarily that's the quantity of partnerships they have, but organizations that are collaborative, that show that they are able to do that kind of work, and aren't just insular and doing their own thing.
Great input. Counselor Medina?
Looking at the food providers and under decision factors secondary, it says interest in supporting the building's use as a resiliency hub. Would that cover that, or are you thinking something more specific?
Well, my play well with others had more to do with attitudinal. I think Councilor Calais said it really well. People who build constructive partnerships and have a reputation for that, versus being more insular and not really, you know, working well with other organizations. There's going to be a lot of compromise and a lot of, you know, for these organizations to coexist in a single building, they need to get along. So I think having, I think Councilor Coley said it really well.
Yeah, and I Counselor Collet?
Yeah, just another point that's, I think, a little further down the road, but should be made now, because sometimes these grants and processes take a while. It was mentioned that utilities are really high cost, and with it being a resiliency hub, exploring solar and battery storage for this building, that's obviously grant funded and not being paid for by the city, would be really beneficial, especially if food distribution is the main tenant of what's going on there.
I just want to second
Yeah.
that very strongly.
Yeah, agreed. Counselor Medina?
So I don't know if this is like too nitpicky or anything, but like knowing different models of food pantries and food banks and stuff. I don't know, this might be like a secondary factor, but if like the food distribution can use a client choice model of food distribution instead of or a hybrid at least, that serves the needs of the community of talent, right? Because it is more, man, I have the words in my head. Well, it just leaves you feeling more human than just like giving you a box of stuff they think you'll eat.
I have just a couple more items. One is, so I'm sure that there is a model, I just don't have it in my head, so I want to have a better understanding that when spaces are empty, do we have a reserve in some way that is paying for the other larger space? And just making sure that we design it in such a way that we do have that. So if we model the payment of the larger spaces to make the exception for the food distribution, how can that flex when it's 75% full or 80% full or half full? And I would imagine reserves can get us there. And then also, previously, when we had concerns about damage, we were not in a position to do any recovery of damages to make sure that that all occupants understand have that role when damage occurs. I think it's gonna be challenging when there's a shared space like that. And, but I'm sure we can figure it out. But again, I think that's kind of a reserve thing and I just want to make sure that it was the challenges we faced before. That doesn't get lost in the, in the way that we move forward. And I do also want to say, I appreciated the comment that Stuart made about, I don't remember the exact words were, but you know, from my view, when we're talking about who are we going to lease with, it's going to be Access, right? And so that does seem a little diminishing to the volunteers that are here. But when I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking about the business arrangement that we're making, we're actually going to be donating this space to Access, and that's who we'll be doing business with. That's correct, right? Yeah, it's just my lines of thinking, but I want to make sure that everybody knows that efforts to distribute food by volunteers is greatly appreciated. And it's not just the folks that distribute this Access food, but also other food distribution that happens in our community. Councillor Byers and then Councillor Perry Miller.
So as I look on here under, both A and B, other decision factors, organization has paid staff with whom city can maintain regular communications. I am of a mind to instead perhaps have a signed an element of communications expectation included in the lease that any group signs, as opposed to necessarily having paid staff that outlines those communications expectations and availability and to whom they should be directed. I am also feeling like it should be stated that any organization that uses that space must provide liability insurance or be under the umbrella of an organization that does provide liability insurance.
I just want to say that I agree with the second part of that, but I just want to offer some concern about the first part.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we, again, in a situation, for example, the food pantry is a perfect example of it. We have an organization of volunteers that report to Access. And so nobody on the site is a paid staff regularly. Having a designated paid staff member that can speak for the organization, I think, is a critical piece of this. And it certainly was one of Gary's biggest challenges previously. So I think that language is important, and I only know that because of the history of that particular item. I appreciate what you're saying. You know, it doesn't mean that somebody on site has to be a paid person. It just means that the communicate there. It's sort of like the doctor and the nurse practitioner, right? You've got to have a doctor involved in. Yeah. Councilor Medina, were you raising your hand?
No, I was about to, but I'm not.
Oh,
done with
Councilor
my
Perry,
thought.
sorry. This is actually, this shape actually works pretty good. And if you don't mind whiplash. Councilor Perry Miller.
Thank you. This might be a wildly unpopular question to ask, but I am wondering now, based on all this conversation, if it might behoove us to bump the record of financial stability up to a minimum requirement for the non-food tenants. If quite frankly, they're going to be footing the bill for everybody else. I feel like having a record of financial stability might be suddenly much more important. But I mean, high priority is also high priority. So that's kind of just a question.
One point that we brought up, and you know, I'm sorry, we're beating this thing to death a little bit, but one of the points that we brought up too was, like, for example, with Talent Business Alliances, not all of the services are free services. Some of them are just low barrier service. And it did occur to me, it was one of the reasons, you know, we talked about is we're not providing free services directly to the users. Is there any appetite for putting that in there? Like at one point in time, we were talking about something like that, and I just want to bring that back up before we close this. that the providers provide a direct and free service to the residents in our community. Counselor Alex Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor. The only pause that I would offer in that regard is, I think there are some, we had some interest from a local medical provider who is for profit, but interested in the possibility of providing nonprofit medical service here. I think there are some services that are really high value that would serve the population that we're talking about, that do have a cost recovery component to them, that I don't know that we necessarily want to exclude entirely.
Is there room? I'm so glad you said that because, but because of that, is there room for us to embed language where it pushes them, like it pushes a provider to the bottom of the barrier, you know, like really pushes them? I would hate to get an ABC in there and have it not actually end up being low barrier, which can happen. Is there language that we can put in there that would provide for the greatest potential possibility?
I think so, and I think it's related to Councilor Konamarov's point that there isn't language that necessarily captures the benefit to the individuals. I mean, we talk about serving high need populations and benefits to the organization, but I mean, some consideration about what the benefit of that service to the individual, I think, and that would include we could include the consideration of what's the payment, what's the cost of that service if there is one, in that fact.
Council Perry, that's complex for sure. Council Perry Miller.
What about just adding low barrier language to the first bullet point, meeting the intent of the grant, i.e. low barrier services to the people of talent? Is that still too vague?
I have no objection to that language. I think that helps, express the intent of what you.
I would call it no to low barrier, no to low. I just hate the idea of anybody going in there and not providing for that. All right, Councilor Medina. Yeah. Get that pen out
This is probably too vague, but like in the high priority for regular full-time tenants, it says serving directly, particularly high need populations. If we put effectively serve directly, particularly high need populations, I feel like that's not grammatically correct. Would that help us be able to see, like, I like the no cost, low cost, services, but also like if there is a cost, could we effectively see like, would that benefit the community or not? Like, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it wouldn't exclude them, but we could be like, well, is that really gonna benefit the community? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I don't know how you say it though. But
I don't know how he's there.
It
Good
makes
luck, Alex.
I think
thoughtful.
I got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
all right. Anybody else? Councilor Penamara? Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so I'll take that question.
Okay. Did you want to add something about criteria, Alex?
Just to clarify, a couple clarifying, just to make sure that I got the discussion correctly. So first of all, in terms of the cost recovery, sounds like the council is interested in seeing what that cost structure is. I think you're right, Mayor, that a reserve account based on an assumption about occupancy and vacancy rates makes sense as part of that calculation. And in terms of the criteria, the plays well with others or history of collaboration feels to me like it could be a challenge to assess. And I propose that we tackle that more as part of the expectations of sort of the agreement that you know, we expect everybody, present to attend or just setting that expectation. Because I think it is tough to evaluate.
In terms of like entry criteria, I didn't get that. Is that what you meant? Did you mean it to be just as built-in language, or did you mean it as criteria? No, were you hearing what's this?
It was Councilor Penamroff and Councilor Calais. Yeah,
I don't think that's necessarily criteria in here. I think that,
More along the lines of how
Yeah.
to sustain your tenancy?
yes.
Yeah,
and then the only comment that I would like additional clarification if the rest of the council agrees was, I think Councilor Penamroff suggested eliminating current city tenants as a decision factor entirely. So whether that's the sense of the council as a whole, I appreciate clarification.
and since we're touching on the point of, the plays well with others, I mean, I think there's more language there. Including, again, just trying to think of like the issues we've had to deal with, like a standard of cleanliness, especially in the shared space. And, yeah, and just agreements. I would imagine there's some really good standard language, that you can find in property development or, property management documents. I know my company used them. Counselor Coley?
Yeah, one question I have that goes down the line a little bit towards the management of the building, but I think it's relevant to when you'll be talking to potential tenants about what they might get out of this. And it was brought up in this conversation is, I don't know if I know or if it's been presented of how much of that parking lot we will actually own versus the other occupants of that parking lot. The only one that I currently have in my head that's using it is Medicap, but also the osteopath is in there. So I would expect maybe some fact finding with the other neighbors to be done about what their expectation is for the parking lot. And then being able to come back and offer to potential tenants of what they could actually use with that space so that we're not messing up Medicap's queue of 10 cars at 5 PM or whatever, because we want to keep Medicap at talent.
Yeah, there were some comments about that and about parking, and that it's a shared parking space. So I do think it really makes us look at whether or not we want to provide services out in the parking lot and have people out in the parking lot with that kind of cross. Counselor Byers?
I'm sorry, this is so unrelated,
Do
but
it.
yeah. Especially since a primary purpose of this facility is to distribute food. I would expect that this facility has a mop sink, but if it doesn't, we really need to have one installed.
Yeah, totally.
Boy, that is specific.
I know.
Way to bring the thunder. All right. And process, any questions on process? Is everybody done with, looks like kind of middle language, criteria before we move to process? Alex?
I still am not sure if Councilor Penamroff is speaking for herself or for the sense of the council as a whole on the question of prioritizing current city tenants,
Prioritizing what?
current city tenants.
Deprioritizing.
Or, you're right, I didn't have, I had it as a secondary factor, to, city tenants, and honestly, when I look at the high priority decision factors, I don't think we have current city tenants that necessarily are going to meet those high priority factors. But, I do think it'd be helpful for me to understand, whether you want that to be a factor at all.
Right, that's a counselor, question to Counselor Penamroff, and then I'll go to
Well,
Counselor Byers and
It
Terry
was
Miller.
whether my opinion was shared by the council.
Mhm.
I think I'm all about the best benefits for, the folks in talent who are going to be receiving the services. And I'm not sure that prioritizing current tenants feeds into that equation for me. Nothing against the current tenants. So that's why I was suggesting, not having that as a criteria to prioritize current tenants. That was my suggestion, and Alex wants to know if you guys agree with it or not.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Counselor Perry Miller, and then Counselor Byers.
I agree with Counselor Penamroff.
I do as well, especially since if a current city tenant is meeting the high priority bullet point, criteria, then it doesn't matter that they're a current city tenant.
I have one more question.
Councilmember Miller?
Alex, what does it mean in the section A, for the regular tenants when it says that the use matches central business district zoning?
There's not a lot that excludes, it was just sort of dotting my i's and crossing my t's, thinking about what are the things that for sure we don't want to mess up. That would be one of them, but I don't think I can't think of any likely uses here that would not meet that.
Counselor Penamara?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back. I think the question of, you know, whether or not the tenants are going to be accommodating to other tenants, I think, I just want to go back. I think that should be part of the selection criteria. Maybe, you know, maybe other decision factors, a lower ranking one, but I think it should be in there. If there is like a difficult, it's hard to get a difficult tenant to play nice. So
Counselor Medina?
So like, how would, like, I'm new to this, so how would you decide, like, what information would you get to be like, oh, this is gonna be a difficult person? Like, I don't have experience with that.
yeah, you do, whether you like them or not.
But no, that's not how you pick people. No, I need like concrete, I need concrete like examples. That's how my brain works. Yeah, like, what would you, I don't know.
Counselor Collet?
I think you'd look at their history of past partnerships and you could also ask them directly, are you willing to work in a shared space with X, potential X, you know, in there, all these different things. Yeah.
So like the interview question kind of thing. Okay, that's what I just wanted to know.
And if they say, no, I want the whole building to myself,
So
sorry.
I do want to just, I mean, this just sounds random, but it's not. And just prior to everything changing in terms of how we ran tenancy, and it wasn't just the fire at Town Hall, there was a lot going on just before that fire happened. And I do think it might be worthwhile to look in Gary's emails with some of the tenants that we have around town. And because I do think it helps to identify some of the concerns that were emerging just before the fire happened. Certainly that was being reported to us. I don't know if there's a communication trail, but it may inform like just best practices for this, because I think the shared space will probably be the potential for the most conflict. And if there's anything to learn from that, I certainly would look into it if you have the capacity for that. So let's go ahead and try to get to processes, and so that we have another big item on the agenda tonight. So I want to make sure we can have time for both. Counselor Penamara?
Yeah, so I'm seeing that the lease agreements come before council for final approval. I just want to say, I understand that this is like a game of Tetris, and it's going to be like probably really complex, and I do trust staff to make really good decisions there. I feel as a basis of principle that, you know, the final decision should come to council, should be approved by council. And that's really not coming from wanting to micromanage, because I really don't. But the idea of, you know, checks and balances, that so the city can say the final decision was made by the elected representatives of the city. We're representing the community elected representatives signed off on this. So I'm not sure if the lease agreements accomplishes that. I'm thinking that number 3, where it says that provisional tenancy decision and rationale would be shared with the council for its information only. I'm wondering maybe whether at that point would be an approval and go ahead. Yes, it sounds good to us. Make the offers. I think that having the council approve at that step would satisfy what I'm looking for as far as checks and balances.
Counselor Collet?
Yeah, that's how I envision it going to the council deciding on who the tenants are and then approving the leases afterwards. That would allow for potential public comment to be made at the meeting where we select the tenants. And yeah, I think also since it's such a public facing project and there may be a lot of feelings and input going into it, there already has been. I think it would allow for everybody to be heard and then the buck would stop with us. And so
So everybody would be mad at us.
everybody would be
and
mad
not
at us
you.
instead of Alex for.
I just want to make sure I understand, is this an ongoing policy? Or would this be a policy that lives with that building?
Yeah, maybe so. I think, in other words, if what I interpret your question to be, it's all settled and then tenant, Y leaves and there's an application for another tenant to come in. That would be, staffs make some sort of decision, how's a lease agreement, ready to go. That lease agreement would come to the council for approval. I can see that. I don't feel like that's a big lift. I think the initial configuration, the Tetris, is gonna be the challenging one.
Any other comments? Counselor Byers?
To me, that almost mirrors the process that we have with grant applications where the council wants to see the application just to be sure that the funding is something that applies towards a city goal or project that exists. And for me, this process is similar to that in that this building has a very specific role to fill in our community.
Well, everybody knows that I didn't agree with that in the first place. I felt like coming from somebody who's been in planning so many years, that clear and objective criteria and leaving it to the staff. But I do appreciate the points that both of you are making about the accountability piece. I mean, to me, that's what I'm hearing. And so. Is there any other on process? Counselor Byers? Was that an indication that there's a comment coming? I mean, I feel like I know the signs.
No.
Okay, all right. So if there's nothing else, I'd like to try and move on to the rest of the agenda. Counselor Panama?
Do we need a motion? Alex, do we need a motion?
I think we
Okay.
probably changed it so much that it's gonna come back in different shape. All right.
Yeah, I think, just so there's no misunderstandings, I probably would come back. The primary substance being the cost structure being the next conversation, but then that would also give you all an opportunity to make sure that I did capture comments from tonight.
Counselor Collet?
Just one more question, we'll be done. What's the timeline on this building again? Because we don't even own the building yet.
We are working on a purchase and sale agreement. We have a appraisal. We should have the environmental review done within the next couple of weeks. And we're anticipating putting this in next year's budget. So I anticipate closing the first or second week of July.
So if we're gonna do that, I want us to then discuss a way to get access. Sorry, that's my technical mind, thinking about who we're actually doing business with. Access and the food pantry volunteers out of the heat during the summer, the really hot months that are coming. And so we haven't had a plan in the past about that, but I do think we can come up with something until then, because it sounds like it's going to be a while. And I would also offer that some sort of offering to Rogue Food Unites as well, if they have, if they decide that they have the need. I don't know what their arrangement over at Oregon Shakespeare Festival is, but okay, that was a comment that was made about, I appreciated again Stuart's comment about getting out of the weather and making sure that we do that as quickly as possible. All right, so if there's nothing else, yep, Council Penamara?
No, I was just thinking about Stuart's comments and also maybe access to a restroom. I don't understand why they couldn't.
I
use
think
the
if they
restroom.
were coming in here, they would have access to
Yeah,
a
okay.
restroom.
Good.
I mean, I think we have to limit that because it's pretty booked, but it sounds to me like it would be a short-lived. And it would be based on bad weather. Or the building, like
This
building
building.
face. Okay. All right, thank you, everybody. Good conversation, and we'll see a revised vision of that next time. Sorry, we're sending you back again. The next item on the agenda is 8.1, accept findings of the Railroad District Study Staff Report.
Great, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Matt Brinkley is going to present the bulk of the presentation. I just want to set it up with a couple other comments. One is you, I believe, have either electronically and or in writing comments from the South Talent Neighborhood Association.
Yeah.
That they're supportive of the general conclusion that staff is offering, but even more so, they believe that the study itself may underestimate some of the costs and difficulties of developing this area. And then the couple other process points just to emphasize, and Matt, if you had this in the staff report, I apologize, but just to be clear that the planning commission did make a formal motion requesting that the council support the findings of this study. They actually suggested the moving directly to taking it out of the comp plan. The primary reason staff is not recommending that right now, and rather just the acceptance or adoption, is that the greatest use for the city of that step would be a swap, and we're not actually in a position to do a swap right now. So,
And when you say a swap, you mean
a
a
UGB land swap.
UGB
Sorry,
lands, yeah,
apologies.
UGB boundary swap, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. With that, why don't I turn it over to Matt?
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. Matt Brinkley, Green Top Planning. Pleasure to be here tonight, joined tonight with data and geospatial information scientist and my business partner, Nikki Hart Brinkley. And she is here in case you have any questions about the buildable lands inventory, which is sort of related to this and the issue that you were just discussing with the UGB land swap. And it is also one of the first things that we're asking you to direct staff to do here in the future. All right, so if we could get the presentation up, please. And while Hector's pulling that up, I'll just editorialize that this is a very high level feasibility study. There were some questions and comments that were made both at the Citizens Advisory Committee and that Planning Commission meeting about the accuracy of these. These are estimates that were not made with the benefit of having an engineer go out and do $1 million worth of plans. So just something to keep in mind as we go through this, because there were questions about underestimating the costs that are associated with development. So thank you, Hector. And if you go on to the next slide. So I'll just be going over some of the key findings. This is not a feasibility study that Green Top did. So kind of presenting this on the behalf of another consultant. So I'll try to answer any questions you might have as best I can, but there may be some that I can't answer because I didn't actually do this. And then why we're asking you to adopt this, and finally, future actions that would be related to adopting or accepting the feasibility study. And so there's, oh, next slide, please. So there's a resolution in your packet, and we'd be asking you to approve that and accept the feasibility study, and subsequently to direct staff to do the 5 things that are listed up there. And I won't reread to you, they're in your packet. And they're kind of in order of priority, and also when those things would be done from short to sort of longer term. And there are reasons for that that we can discuss later. Next slide, please. So this isn't the first time that Talent has looked at this area. Going back to 2007, there's a master plan for this area that's actually adopted into the comprehensive plan. And I would say, as an aside, removing that actually will take a little more work than just passing a resolution, because you're actually updating your comprehensive plan. So it will take a little bit of work. Hopefully there'll be some grant money in the future that could support that the way that it did back in 2005 when that study was started. But the area is a 155-acre area. The area that the feasibility study looks at is 91 acres. There's, I think, one area that is actually in the city that has been subdivided that's not maybe accounted for the same way in the feasibility study. And that's the difference in the amount of land. And the same thing, that the plan was designed to guide annexation, zonings, other land use actions, and infrastructure investments in this area, because they will be needed, because it's largely undeveloped, was in 2007, and remains largely undeveloped now. But the study is pretty applicable, even though it's a little more conceptual. It has a lot of good things in it, goals and objectives that are still applicable today, and things that you might be considering in how you want to move forward with the feasibility study. Next slide, please. So looking at some of the key findings, and you have this in your packet, but some of the things that are probably most important according to that Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, and that's something that was recently finalized by the Department of Administrative Services for the state of Oregon. Talent needs 680 dwelling units over the next 20 years. And that's more than what your Portland State University population projection has projected, because it takes into account underproduction, it takes into account vacation rentals, second homes, things like that. And that's a lot more than what is in your projection currently. The railroad district, even if it is, the whole thing is built out, can only accommodate 60% of that demand. And the way that it would do so is also something that you should be thinking about as you're looking at the kinds of housing that Talent needs. Also in the feasibility study, there's a note that I think it's well over 50% of renters in the city of Talent are cost burdened. And that means that they spend more than 30% of their gross income, so before taxes, on housing, on the cost of rent, utilities, and I think those are the two main things. And that's actually pretty remarkable, and significantly higher than most of the communities here in the Rogue Valley. And so as you're thinking about this, we're thinking about, will the kinds of housing that could be built in the railroad district meet the needs of renters and homeowners in the city of Talent currently and in the future? And part of that issue is that last bullet point. Most of the land in the railroad district is designated in your comprehensive plan as being low density. And it's designated that way, not accidentally, but a lot of land is slope constrained. It's difficult to build housing types that are more affordable to lower and middle income households in those kind of conditions. Next slide, please. And so getting down to brass tacks, or whatever kind of metaphor you want to use, looking at the cost of infrastructure, some things that really stick out, a collector street, which would really be needed if you were to go with scenarios, I think it's 1 and 3, which is the building out the entirety of the railroad district, or even just building out the so-called flat and slight to moderately sloped lands would require this collector street to be constructed. It would run sort of along the current alignment of the TID canal. You'd probably want to put the TID canal into a pipe, which is more cost. I don't know if that was really accounted for in this, but $12 million just for that expense alone to upgrade 2 railroad crossings, Rapp Road and I think Belmont, is $7.6 million. And you'll notice if you look at the study, there were earlier estimates for that work. They have gone up significantly. So with inflation, all of this public infrastructure has gotten a lot more expensive just over the last few years. That's not coming down, and will probably just continue to escalate over time. Stormwater, another $5 million. I didn't put sanitary sewer on here. There is sanitary sewer in this area, but getting underneath the canal and crossing the canal, both for sanitary sewer and water, or for sanitary sewer and storm rather, will be significant expenses that I don't know were adequately accounted for. Again, engineers didn't go out and take a look and try to figure out where the canal was in relation to where those pipes would need to go. And that can be very complicated and expensive. So, expensive infrastructure that is required. Next slide, please, Hector. Looking at it with 3 development scenarios. There's a 4th scenario, which is essentially not to build, so I'm not really going to talk about that. But these first 3 scenarios, you will notice that 2 of them, the infrastructure costs are incredibly high compared to the sales price for, a home. The idea is that, developers like to do things that make them money, and this project will cost them a lot of money. So it's questionable that building out the entirety of the railroad district as is conceived in scenario number 1 would pencil. And that it would appeal to a developer, particularly if they're going to be doing development types, housing types that are costing them more money and earning them less. Scenario 3 is similar. It's a little less expensive, but not too much. You still have that collector street to build. You still have railroad crossings to do. And the other thing is too, if this whole area builds out with, 462, I think is the estimate for the number of dwelling units that could be accommodated by scenario 1. Scenario 3 is like a little over 300, I think, or a little under 300. If you put that many homes into the railroad district, given its location, I'm sure totally within the wildland urban interface, and just with fire code being the way that it is, and quite frankly should be, egress is a huge issue. And this is something that was looked at back in 2007 with that plan. So you really have to have that collector. You can't just sort of have these intermittent crossings of the railroad that currently exist and provide access to private roads that go up into the hills. It takes something a lot more than that. And so that's why that's a cost that's in scenarios 1 and 3. It's not in scenario 2. Scenario 2 is just the flat land that's in the kind of northwest extreme of the railroad district. And that one sort of makes a little bit of sense. It also is the only scenario that provides land that would be accommodating to housing that's affordable to lower middle income households. So higher density housing, whether that's, apartments, rentals, middle housing, small single family detached housing on small lots. Next slide, please. And so this really kind of raises the question, I think, that the 2007 study was looking at as it was planning for development in this area. And that is, do any of these scenarios, is the build out of the railroad district really something that meets your broader goals as a city? So even if you could do it, even if the city of Talent came up with, $200 million to invest in infrastructure to support the development of housing, would that be the thing that you wanted to do? Would it deliver the housing that meets the needs of the members of your community? Is it an effective use of your public resources? And finally, is this the best place for Talent to grow? So those are all questions that kind of came to my mind as I was thinking about the feasibility study and things that might frame your thinking as we move forward. And so speaking of moving forward, next slide, please. So why adopt this study? The first thing I want to stress is that this is not a land use decision. This is not something that is going to go into your comprehensive plan. However, it will provide part of a factual basis for what will go into your comprehensive plan over the course of time. And eventually that could lead up to replacing what you have in the comprehensive plan for the railroad district with something different, either pulling it out as you start looking at doing a UGB swap, or changing it in some way that makes a lot more sense for the current goals for development growth for the city of Talent. And so with that, next slide. What we're looking at for council direction, should you decide to accept the feasibility study and then direct staff in moving forward, you see the list here in front of you, again, kind of ranked in priority and also in what we're proposing would happen over a period of time. So the first thing would be to proceed with formal adoption of a residential buildable lands inventory that was completed. There was a work session on it back in October. And that is something that does belong in your comprehensive plan. You have one adopted right now. But the whole purpose in updating that was to get a better idea of what your inventory is for residential land. And the feasibility study, I think, does very correctly point out that currently your railroad district is your largest inventory of available buildable land. Whether or not it is actually able to be built and developed is another question. And that's what the feasibility study really looks at. But adopting that residential buildable lands inventory provides a basis for moving forward with one of the other items, which is potentially to update your housing needs analysis. That hasn't been done in a little while. But the second thing on this list is to update your land development code. That's something that has been talked about. It's kind of moving forward a little bit, but that kind of needs to happen so that you get an idea of what you can do, which leads into the third point, and that is to explore the opportunity of doing a UGB swap for residential land out of the railroad district and into potentially one of your urban reserves. TA5 would be the one that you would be looking at for that. And then considering updating the railroad district plan, changing that kind of at the same time. And finally, as I mentioned before, updating the housing needs analysis so that you have that factual basis for developing policy related to housing in your comprehensive plan moving forward. And it's a good time to start thinking about that because we have this Oregon housing needs analysis that has suddenly allocated a lot of additional population to cities throughout the entire state. I mean, I think like every city got a couple new dwelling units at the very least, and Talent got quite a bit. So, and finally, next slide, we have a proposed motion, and the wording of this could change a little bit to rather than accepting the railroad district feasibility study. And with that, I'll try to answer any questions you have.
I have a handful of prepared questions that I'd like to work through all at once. So before I do that, I'm going to just entertain everybody else's questions first. Councilor Collet?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I think it's for Dave. My assumption is since the staff is making this recommendation, if we make this decision, it's not exposing us to any more risk regarding the existing lawsuit about the railroad district.
No, I don't see that it does.
Sorry, you guys, this might take a few minutes. Anyway, I do want to clarify, well, I'll just jump in here. So, on page 92, you talk about, maximum housing capacity of 426 units. That would be achieved, from the maximum feasibility residential build out of the railroad district at the cost of $220 million. I think that's item number or key takeaway number 1, if I remember correctly. And then the city, but the city would, if we did that, if we chose that, we would still not meet our projected housing demand. I just want to make sure. I think I saw that it was 660 units from the DLCD. Is that correct?
680, I think is the,
680.
yeah,
Okay, so
I think that's the number.
so the current future demand, our current housing, I don't think it's needs analysis anymore. It's housing something, opportunity, housing something opportunity, but it is now 680. That's done.
Yeah, so, and if I could just clarify that real quickly. DLCD is doing rulemaking right now about how the Oregon housing needs analysis is going to be used or should be used by communities. It's not going to replace your population projection. Somehow they're going to learn to play together harmoniously, and both numbers are going to drive your housing needs analysis or housing capacity analyses.
That's it right there. Well, that's good. I mean, it is a significant difference than what we had before, and it's a lofty goal.
Yes.
And then from the DLCD projected future housing demand, it will require the city to look beyond the railroad district to meet the demand of the, regardless of how low or how much additional housing can potentially be sited at railroad district. In other words, even if we were able to optimize that opportunity, we still need to look beyond that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, I think that is an important point when you're talking about where to invest that infrastructure funding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. And then, sorry about this. I've got a handful of these. So, let's see, the infrastructure required for scenario 2, which would be the amount of 19 million. And that's the one where there is no railroad district collector. The infrastructure shown for scenario 3 would be to build the flat and the moderately sloped area. It does include a railroad collector, and that cost is 123 million, right? Do I have
Yeah,
that
the
right?
total infrastructure cost is 123 million.
So how much of that $123 million infrastructure cost for scenario 3 did you determine would be attributable to the railroad district collector?
I think it's $12 million to build the collector, whether you build out the entire district or you just build out the flat and the slight to moderately slope. The collector costs what the collector costs. And it's necessary because at some point you have enough development that you have to have that collector. As I was saying earlier, you can't just route traffic, particularly during an emergency, over 4 railroad crossings, 2 of which may not be able to continue to exist depending on what the railroad decides to do. Because they don't like having lots of railroad crossings. And as you upgrade one, you might have to get rid of others. So the collector is really necessary in order to be able to move traffic around to the railroad district, whether you build 300 homes or 426 homes.
I am so glad you said that, because that's been a clarifying point that we have grappled with for as long as I can remember. And nobody's ever said that, like that needs to be said. I appreciate that. So the northwesternmost parcel on the property, if it were not developed, and if the properties between the northwest parcel and the southeastern parcel of the railroad district were not developed, how much of the $123 million of cost would be attributable solely to the development of the moderate sloped area? Do you get the question? Like,
You might have to repeat that.
yeah, I mean, Okay, so, if the northwesternmost parcel shown in your, graphics here, I think it's on page 93 of my packet, were not developed. And if the properties between the northwesternmost parcel and the southeasternmost parcel of the railroad district were not developed, how much of that $123 million infrastructure would it cost solely to develop the moderately sloped area?
That-
Does that make sense? Is that something you can calculate?
I cannot. And again, I didn't do the feasibility study, so,
I think it would be great to get, if somebody could calculate that to get, I don't think it'll be, I mean, I think the decision's gonna, may or may not be made tonight, but it would be good to know that.
yeah, that's something that we can ask. The way that they did the pro forma, I don't think they did it in a way where they attach development costs to individual parcels, or, so it'd be difficult to kind of pull that out, but we can ask.
Well, I guess what I do want to say is that what that question demonstrates is that in order to develop just that one piece, a portion of that $123 million needs to be spent. And then, so it does ask, you know, how much of that money are you attributing to just that one development? And I think that's an important question
Yeah.
to know. All right. So I want to ask you, of those infrastructure costs, I want to ask you what is included and what's not included. So I'm going to ask you are these infrastructure, so we know what the infrastructure cost essentially is. It's either $220 million or $123 million, right? I mean, the $19 million is kind of moved. So of that, does that provide for the, all the water piping and the pumping capacity to get the water up the hills and to the new developments? Does it include any of that?
So this is a really high level estimate. It does include, I think, the water part of it is pretty much accounted for because there's existing infrastructure which the consultant determined to be sufficient. It doesn't include, you know, running all of the service laterals and all of the mains through a network of local streets. That's also estimated, but that's estimated kind of on a linear, sort of average linear foot. So it doesn't get to the level of addressing site-specific challenges that you may run into, and crossing the TID canal would be one of those challenges. I mean, no one went out and did geotechnical work, so, you know, if you could have a bunch of bedrock just 5 feet underneath the surface, and that makes putting in pipes really expensive. I don't think that they got to that level. They took a pretty high level estimate on a per unit basis to estimate those things. And that really affects what the storm sewer would cost, sanitary, because all that stuff has to go and cross underneath the TID canal.
Yeah, and that's my next question, actually. And again, not included in that $123 million. So we're talking about all of these costs that were really not accounted for in the feasibility study.
Yeah.
What about what about upgrading the TID crossing? Is that included?
Crossing you mean crossing TID with the other utilities?
Uh-huh.
I don't know that they looked at that or that they accounted for that. It's a kind of thing that would really require some level of engineering to understand, because you don't know what you're going to do with the canal. You have to know that in order to estimate that. You have to know about that in order to know where the pipes are going to go. And that drives the cost both for your storm and your sanitary sewer that are going to gravity feed down to Talon Avenue.
Yeah, and easy or hard, it's not included in the feasibility study. It would be additional costs.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think so.
for the
And this is something
infrastructure.
that came up both at the Citizens Advisory Committee and then maybe at the Planning Commission, or one or the other. And I think the consultant acknowledged that they hadn't looked
I
that
must
far
have missed
into it.
'cause I was, yeah. And then, so what about, and this was a big bone of contention at the time, during one of the hearings, what about the widening and the paving of Belmont Road? Is that included in any of the infrastructure costs?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think they estimated what a typical cross section would cost. But I don't know where they started and stopped that estimation, so.
Yeah, and if you look at the design, it cuts into everybody's yard along that. Acquiring the property, was that included?
Yeah, so right of way acquisition, I don't think was included. It was just kind of built in to an average per foot cost. And so there are unique conditions that this level of engineer or this level of estimating cannot address. And I'm sure that it wasn't.
Yeah, I appreciate that point because I think it's really important for us to look at this realistically. And when you look at that design and the elevation that design has to achieve for the railroad crossing, how about that?
With the railroad crossings, I think that the numbers are probably a little bit more accurate, but again, they're not engineered. You did have an estimate of cost that was in your TSP for at least RAP, if not Belmont. It looks like those numbers were updated and rose dramatically, but that, they weren't completely engineered,
Yeah,
so.
and I don't think it accounted for, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think it accounted for like building the slope and the retaining walls and all of the,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very unique transportation structure. I'd be curious about that.
Yeah, and just anecdotally, the city of Central Point spent about 15 years trying to get a crossing over into Twin Creeks. And I think that ended up finally costing close to $20 million. A different kind of crossing in a very different road, much higher traffic road, but yeah, these things tend to end up costing a lot more.
Yeah, well, like I said, if you ever saw that design to that crossing. And then I guess the last question I have is, so closing the current public rail crossing at the public road and acquiring the right of way and constructing an access to the road parallel to the railroad running northwesterly from the public road, up to an upgraded Belmont Road, was that analyzed as part of the infrastructure cost?
I would have to ask the consultant to see if they did. My guess is, again, that sounds like a pretty specific condition that they probably would not have looked at.
Yeah, and it's one that's been talked about time and time again in this application. And it never seems that there is a cost tied to it. Okay, so I just have a couple more. So assuming that the northwestern parcel of the railroad district and the properties between the northwestern most parcel and the southeastern parcel is not developed, but also assuming the railroad crossing at Belmont were made into a public crossing without roadway connection down to the public road, wouldn't that mean that there would only be the one access in and out? And I think you addressed that earlier. That's the egress thing
Yeah.
that you're talking about, right?
Yep.
So the safety concerns that have been brought up over and over and over again are affirmed by that.
Correct.
Yeah.
And building and fire code has a limit on how many units can be built without a second means of egress, and the number escapes me right now, but it is not 300. It is something, it's like an order of magnitude less, it's like 30. So that is like a serious issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, keeping in mind the discussions of the safety issues that are the top priority at the Planning Commission. What safety issues would have to be considered if there were only one access at the southeasternmost parcel? Like, are there any additional other than?
Well, I mean, that is the safety issue. Could you get around it or, do something to address that other than providing more access? Maybe you would have to sprinkle every single home and do a bunch of other stuff that I don't have the expertise to say that could be done, but and I don't even know that, that fire wants to approve those kinds of things anymore in light of the kind of risk that we have now.
Yeah. I think it's important to clarify that when you say sprinkle every home, you mean a sprinkler system in every home on that hillside.
Yeah. I mean, that's potentially something that somebody could propose. I don't even know that that would really meet the requirements of the fire code, because there's still a need to get people out. If there's a wildfire, and get emergency response in. And so you have to be able to do both those things at the same time, and it's difficult to do when there's only one way in and one way out.
I have a follow-up question to that.
Council Byers?
Would those homes even be insurable then?
Seems like there'd be a real.
Unlikely.
How would you like to tour a house like that for a purchase? What? Okay, so, I know that, it seems to me that I recall that the fire chief, I'm trying to remember her name from Ashland. Do you remember her name? Anyway, I think she weighed in, huh?
Former fire marshal,
Marguerite?
Marguerite Hickman.
Yeah. Yeah, so she had a lot to say about that issue. And it wasn't, yeah. it
And
was
I
along
should
the
note,
same lines.
and I should note her comments were before the Alameda fire.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll never forget her testimony about the sprinklers and such. Anyway, okay, so I noticed that you said earlier accept, and some of the language in the resolution says adopt. What is the difference? And accepting or adopting the resolution? Dave, can you help me with that?
Well, I'm sort of ambivalent about it. I would prefer the word accept because adopt almost suggests a land use decision being made. And as Matt pointed out, this really isn't a resolution about a land use decision. And so I would be inclined to stay as far away from that implication as possible by using the word accept instead of adopt.
Councilor Penamara?
And just to piggyback on that, I'm looking at the language of the resolution itself. And the very last whereas says the city wishes to acknowledge the study as a long-range planning document and source of information. Did you say you didn't want to consider it a planning document in the beginning?
It could be a planning document. It
Okay.
is not a part of your comprehensive plan.
Okay, so there's no problem with that. We just want to swap out the word adopt with the word accept.
I would recommend that.
I think given like some of the questions and answers that we've talked about tonight and some of the comments, I think the only thing the resolution is missing is really just would be kind of reiterating the concerns that the planning commission had. If we were to accept the resolution tonight and just said to include this concerns in the planning motion, would that be sufficient to amend the resolution without us having to get it back? Sorry.
I'm not sure I followed everything you said.
Well, I guess if I wanted to see that if the council wants to see that language put into the resolution, those concerns that came out of the planning commission's concerns, if we wanted to add that, could we just say amend the resolution to add the language from the planning commission? Alex?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the substance of it would be, whereas the planning commission and neighborhood association stated that they believe the report actually underestimated the costs and difficulty of developing this area.
And I appreciate that, but I also think that the safety issues should be mentioned. Because that was part of their concerns, but also, it was purpose of some of these questions was to affirm that that's actually the case. And you even said it in your presentation, like, I think that is a significant issue. And that's post Alameda Fire that we can recognize that. So I just would want it to include the language, if the council so desired, to include the language that you just mentioned, Alex, but then add the safety concerns as well. And can we do that without having to craft it all right now and just say as?
You could do that by saying, as you have with some resolutions in the past, you take the wording of the proposed motion and then just say with this addition, and then state what that addition would be.
Anything. So in order to ask, if a counselor wants to include that in their motion, we should probably say what that is. Counselor Coe?
I think I'm understanding what you're saying. So we would read the potential motion, removing the word adopt and replacing it with the word accept.
Yeah.
Okay, accept. And then we would want to add language, or we want to acknowledge the planning commission and South Talent Neighborhood Association's comments, and also acknowledge the significant safety concerns brought up at this meeting, brought up by other questions.
Yeah, and I think you could adopt it as amended, right? Or you
Right.
could adopt it that way, and then the staff would be, that would be sufficient for the staff to build it into the resolution.
Right, so just adding on to the end of the motion that's proposed, with the following amendment, and then describe as you just did.
So, Counselor Coe, if you are in agreement with that, would you take a stab at the motion? And if anybody else have any more comments? I just sort of took the whole time. Counselor Byers?
I'm wondering if it would also be a good idea to add to that amendment, acknowledging the vast underestimation of the actual development costs.
Yeah. Or at minimum, like the things that are not included in it. Yeah.
I think that comes in where the comments from the planning commission and the neighborhood association, that was the neighborhood association, one of their main points was that the costs are most likely underestimated.
Yeah.
Just to keep it to less. Or something
More
like that.
words, yeah.
I could just say it. You know.
I mean, when you think, I think we can be pretty confident in that when you think about all the things that were on this question list that were likely not in the estimation of the infrastructure. All right,
I have a motion if you're ready.
I'm ready to entertain.
I move to approve resolution 2025-115-R. Accepting the railroad district feasibility study as presented, and to direct staff to initiate the actions identified in the agenda report, with the addition of language acknowledging the planning commission and South Talent Neighborhood Association's questions and concerns, and acknowledging the vast safety concerns brought up in the meeting and presentation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve, to accept resolution 2025-115-R, adopting the railroad,
Wait, hold on, to approve and then.
accepting.
Approved and accept.
Yeah, accepting. Thank you so much. So we have a motion and a second to approve the resolution 2025-115-R, accepting the railroad district feasibility study as presented, and direct staff to initiate the actions identified in the agenda report, acknowledging planning commission and South Talent Neighborhood Association's questions and concerns. Acknowledging the vast safety concerns as discussed in tonight's meeting. Would that give staff enough to modify the resolution?
I believe so, and we should probably make sure we recirculate to you that amended wording. We will do that.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Counselor Quille,
Yes.
Counselor Pereira,
Yes.
Counselor Medina,
Yes.
Counselor Byers,
Yes.
Counselor Perry Miller.
Yes.
Motion carried, Mayor.
Thank you, Hector. Next item on the agenda is 8.2, discussion of possible approval of a public safety fee increase. Staff,
Thank you. Thank you, Matt.
Counselor Byers? Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Yeah.
Should we move to extend the meeting?
Is it that late?
No,
No, 9:30.
9:30. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, we're getting close.
we'll take-
All
take it fine.
right, let's. Staff report?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. The city adopted a public safety surcharge in 2010.
Counselor Byers?
Sorry.
I adopted that surcharge in 2010 to support the general fund out of which the city pays for its police force. And that public safety surcharge has never been adjusted for inflation. And so staff is recommending that council do that. The primary funding source of the general fund is property taxes that unfortunately those receipts were impacted heavily by the Alameda fire and are capped in their growth due to Oregon constitutional rules. So in terms of how to potentially adjust the fee, the staff presented two options. One would be to use a inflator, the consumer price index for urban wage earners and clerical workers specific to the Western US region, running back those numbers since July of 2010 at the time of adoption to 2025 would imply a fee of $5.66 per unit per month, as opposed to the $4 current fee. Another way the council may wish to look at it, and which was the way that was proposed in the staff report, would to be look at the buying power of that fee relative to the cost of providing police services. So at the time of the adoption of the original fee, it was covering approximately just under 15%. I think it was 14.7% of the total cost, the actual total expenses in that year. To cover that same proportion, 14.6 of overall expenses in our current year as estimated would imply a fee of $7.50. I think the only other thing that I should note is the challenges of general fund finances are certainly not unique to City of Talon and go beyond simply adjusting the public safety fee. But staff believes it's an important step in the right direction and would be very helpful for assuring that we have adequate funding for public safety in the next fiscal year.
Any questions or comments? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Counselor Perry Miller.
I move to approve the first reading of an ordinance amending Talent Municipal Code, Title 8, Health and Public Safety, Section 8.30.040, imposition of public safety surcharge to set the public safety surcharge at $5.66 per unit per month.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Can you tell me what page that was on?
122.
Not on my agenda. Let me try and find it. Whoops, that's why. Yeah, thanks. So we have a motion and a second to approve first reading of an ordinance amending Talent Municipal Code Title 8, Health and Public Safety, Section 8.30.040, imposition of the public safety surcharge to set the public safety surcharge at $7.50 per unit per month, as shown in proposed ordinance number 2025-987-.
It was
0.
actually the second motion, 566.
What's that?
It was the second motion.
Oh, was it? Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Scratch that for the record. We have a motion and a second to approve the first reading of an ordinance amending Talent Municipal Code Title 8, Health and Public Safety, Section 8.30.040, imposition of a public safety charge to set the public safety surcharge at $5.66 per unit per month. Any discussion? Counselor Coley?
Yeah, so just to understand the difference between the two numbers, well, the higher one, 750, was calculated to bring it up to the same percentage that the original fee covered, and the second number was calculated in a more consumer-friendly way, essentially, so but it does less to cover our cost, correct?
That's correct.
Counselor Panamarev?
Yeah, I'm inclined to support the 750. Because I think it is important that that the costs are recovered. It's not just inflation, but the cost of maintaining personnel increases at a steeper rate than inflation. I appreciate that that we have been raising a lot of fees lately. This would be an additional $350 per month. It might be, more noticeable, which I think in a way would be good. For people to appreciate what the cost is for having these services. So I think I would lean towards this, between the two, I would lean towards the staff recommendation of the 750.
Counselor Byers?
Councilmember Dean?
I'm just taking it in the order the hands went up.
Okay. Well, initially the 750, it does make sense to me. I think though that our community needs to have an opportunity to have a much deeper discussion and information, educational opportunity to learn about why these fees are increasing and to have, so I feel like this is an incremental step towards something that actually needs to be discussed about what is truly realistic. And for us to be adjusting fees now, to me, it makes sense to be aligning it with the CPI until we've had that discussion.
Any other? Counselor Coley?
Yeah, my question about if we move forward with the 566, how quickly after that would we need to be looking at bringing it up to 750 or potentially higher than that? How much of an incremental improvement is it and how much time essentially does it save us?
Any other deliberation? Counselor Panamarev?
I would move to amend to the 750, if the deliberation is, just to get it clarified. If we vote no, I'm saying they want to vote this. So can I have an amendment to do?
I will entertain that amendment. Do you want to speak to your motion?
Sure,
Okay, Counselor Perry Miller, I saw her hand go up,
thanks.
so.
So yeah, I just think that in 2010, this was the amount, $4, I guess, that the council approved. And in their infinite wisdom, didn't think to ever make it something that adjusted for itself. So I feel like a much bigger conversation is warranted, similar to what Counselor Byers said, if we're going to do more than simply just adjust for that 15-year time difference. I mean, both numbers make sense to me, but they do both feel like a bit of a Band-Aid measure. And I don't know how sustainable either of those amounts are. Yeah, I agree. Our community should have a much larger conversation about this. And just also everything that we're hearing with the heartburn about costs and fees and the cost of living and all the things that go into living anywhere, including in talent. And, you know, even just the conversation about, you know, being able to afford having the community center be something where access isn't paying, like, and people do not want another fee on their bill. So with all that being said, that's why I proposed the first amount, because it felt like a little bit less conversation with the community would be necessary just because of the 2010 date and that number that council proposed back then. So that's why I proposed it. And I don't think I'd be interested in voting for the 750 number, but I do understand it. It does make sense.
I'm going to entertain Counselor Namara's amendment. I'm just taking it in the order and then you can still deliberate.
Yeah, and I think I agree with, Councilor Byers' comments. I feel like we need a bigger Band-Aid. Well, so I moved to amend, changing 566 to 750 and including the language about the ordinance.
Counselor Collet or,
Second.
okay. Any deliberation?
Yeah.
Counselor, Counselor Clay, do you want to speak to, or no, wait a minute, you were a second, right?
Yes.
Okay, Counselor Perry Miller?
Just to reiterate, I do plan to vote no, but I understand the numbers. So yeah, I just think it's more, I don't want to say community minded, but I'm more comfortable with the 566 at this point. But so I will vote no.
Counselor Collet?
Yeah, first off, I agree with your uncomfortability about raising the fee to 750. It's uncomfortable to raise it at all to 566, to be honest, with what people are having to deal with right now. My question, you might kind of mentioned, Counselor Pranamaroff, about what size Band-Aid do we need? Does the staff have an answer of what these different Band-Aids will do? Is this something we're going to find out in our budget process this year? You know, making this decision right now of 566 versus 750. What does that save us as far as time? I do agree that we need to have a bigger community discussion about what that fee is, and I would love to see whatever fee we set increment with inflation as it goes up, so we don't give somebody an albatross in 15 years that they have to raise it to whatever it is.
So the increase to 566 is a 40% increase. So that would add about $60,000 in revenue. So it raised the total revenue generated by the fee to approximately $200,000. So it's be paying for 1.5 officers essentially at 750. That's another 40%. So it would be almost doubling that current 140 to more like 220, where it would be close to covering two officers. In terms of how much difference does that make to the overall budget picture? Of course, the city's a big boat if you think about turning it, right? So it's really about the slope of our declining fund balance. We do, as I said, we do have some big discussions to have with the public about that. It's going to leave us more to deal with, maybe with slightly less time to deal with it. The difference between the two. So the difference between the two is marginal, but it's, that $60,000 within the general fund is significant. Tess and I have been spending a lot of time thinking about $5,000 or $10,000 increments where we consider money or expenses that we think are important to the city, but we may not be able to afford in the next fiscal year.
I just want to make a clarifying point before I take your question. When you say it's a 40% increase, you mean it's a 40% increase? I just want to clarify for the record, that's a 40% increase to the fee. It's a 40% increase to the fee, not to the police budget, like the whole police budget. It's, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
correct.
okay,
Yeah.
just for the record. Counselor Byers?
Yeah, I feel uncomfortable raising it, the fee to $750 as well. It's almost doubling the current fee with zero discussion truly at a community level about it. And the failure to increase fees for the last 15 years, I would say, failure is not the right word. We've been missing a fee maintenance schedule for a long time. And I don't think it is something I'm comfortable asking the community to completely fund that adjustment in one step without a bigger conversation.
So I'm going to go ahead and make my comments and then I'll go back for seconds. So this was one of the suggestions that I hope to see on the agenda was to bring the fee back to the original percentage. And from my perspective, and if the vote were to split, which I think I might actually have a chance to vote tonight.
There are
If
5
it
of
were-
us.
Yeah, if it were, I mean, I'm not counting exactly, but I would support the 750. And the reason for that, my concerns are, I appreciate everything that everybody's saying, and I know things are hard, and I know that these fee increases are going to be challenging and for folks. But it really is a matter of if we don't adjust the fee accordingly, it just comes out of the general fund. And so, the challenge that our low fee has, and we can thank, what is it, Measure 50, for not allowing us to raise our taxes appropriately and keep our general fund happy, making these fees necessary, these unpopular fees necessary, which is one of the reasons why there isn't a fee increase schedule, even though there may need to be. What's important is that no matter what happens here, the balance comes out of the general fund. And so, and we have concerns to deal with when it comes to the general fund. So I think as long as we're living in a state where we can't grow our general fund at the same pace as inflation, which is generally what's happening, we need to look at this tough choice. I do want to just add that that I don't think either of them, and I think we all agree, none of them would preclude us from having the discussion that we do need to have about policing in a small town and the cost of that. And because this isn't going to fix the challenges that we have. It's only going to, as you say, put a Band-Aid on it. And the actual cost of policing in a small town and how the city wants to build in those better financial management moving forward. In the meantime, I would just say that taking us up to the 750 puts us back at the start. My last comment is that it was not a fun choice at that time either. And so yeah, those are my comments. If the vote comes to me, I will vote for 750. Councilor Penamara?
Oh, Councilor Medina hasn't spoken.
No, you go first.
Okay.
Go first. I just want to make sure people don't want to talk after you.
Okay, I just want to say, there will be, this is the first reading, there will be a second reading, so, hopefully folks will hear about this, hopefully it'll be a big, bright, red letter sign on the website, and we'll have some community comment at the next meeting when we have the second reading of this, because I think it's really good that people, need to be aware, that we're having to make decisions like that. So I feel there will be a community conversation about this particular, raise if people are interested. And also just a little perspective, we have been raising rates on other things like sewer, et cetera, more than this. I think it was $7 or whatever it was. And I think I was one of the people that said, let's soften the curve. But that was a very predictable, that was based on a study. We knew where we were going. It was just a matter of just making the gradient a little bit easier as we were getting there. Here, we don't really know. We haven't had the conversation of exactly what the mayor says, what it costs to have a police force in a small town. And I think that this, if anything, will help raise awareness for the attention for that conversation.
Councilor Medina?
Yeah, I have a question. So let's say we end up with pass the 566 per month. How soon can we start getting community input and getting that ball rolling so that we can raise it? So that we're just not operating under 566 for like years again.
Yeah, my hope and the council goals that you all adopted was to have a really robust conversation in the next fiscal year. The end on and the 26-27 budget. Whether we get there, whether you all get there in one year, I think is certainly an open question. I mean, I think there are a lot of big questions there, but what we've talked internally about as a staff is launching some public involvement around and engagement around those questions next fall.
That's good to know. Go ahead, Councilor Byers.
When I am saying I am supportive of the increase to 566 and also understanding of the eventual need to get back to that, at least that percentage of covering about 15% of the costs. To me, that is a request to just gradually reduce the slope, like Councilor Panamrov described at the sewer. Because I do recognize that that conversation with the community will take time, and we will need to have some really robust information gathering as well. And so to me, voting for this slightly more nominal increase at this point in time, I would expect to see before the council another need to increase sooner rather than later. And I would be supportive of that. I just am hoping to make the overall slope of that projection just a tiny bit more palatable for the community in the coming,
I just
shorter
have my
timeframe.
second comments, if I may. So I also want to add, I remember when this conversation happened in 2010 and, when we were talking about, $1 or $2, for some families, that's in this case, it'd be $3 and something. It would be a gallon of milk. Like that's important stuff. And I don't want to sound like I don't recognize that. But the other thing that I think is an important part of this conversation is that we were understaffed for a couple of years. And at the end of the day, for all of the reasons that were projected as why we were understaffed, it boiled down to not being competitive with salaries. And so we made a tremendous adjustment. Now, I recognize that other communities have adjusted since, and maybe we're not as competitive as before, but we're still competitive. We're still just under Ashland. And we're still way more than Phoenix and I think Rogue River. And we're seeing those two communities having a real struggle with their police department. This is happening again. Communities, small communities in particular, find themselves in a position where we're constantly having to struggle to keep our staff on based on competitive wages because we're right next to Ashland and we're right next to Medford. And they offer way more I think they get $500 a month more in Ashland and, if I remember correctly, something like 1,000, correct me if I'm wrong, in Medford a month. And, so we have to, like, we didn't make an adjustment when we raised our wages, that significantly. And if you recall, it was significant and it was a couple of years ago. So, and to add to that significant change in our our wage structure, we are now fully staffed. And so full staff at a higher wage is impacting our financial condition right now. And really that's one of the main factors why I would support 750. And then it's also one of the main reasons why I think we need to have a community conversation about what our policing looks like in the future for a town the size of 6,500. And what are the ways that we can manage that more efficiently, or what, I mean, I don't know how much more we can ask, but I think that's the point of the conversation. So again, if the vote comes to me, I will be voting for 750. Councilor Collet?
Yeah, my worry about the 566 and agreeing with everything that's been said, that we need to have a community conversation, understanding that this is just the first reading and that conversation, at least about this specific decision, could happen at the next meeting, but that is not, in my opinion, the bigger community conversation that we need to have, where if we decide on what we want to see in a police force in a small town and how do you pay for it and how much that costs, I just worry that the 566 is, like, for lack of a better term, performative for whatever amount of time that may take, and that the increase might be significant after that. And so I understand that the jump from $4 to 750 is significant, but it's hard because I don't know what that future increase is going to be. So
All right, so on the amendment, roll call, please. Mm-hmm.
yes,
Yes.
No.
No.
Okay, so on the original motion, is there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
yes,
Yes.
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 Okay, thank you. I realized I had no chance of voting. There's there's an uneven number.
Somebody could have
We have an
abstained.
absent counselor.
Mr. Pestizo was there. And they were like, I don't.
All right.
He missed out. He could have had some fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is 8.3, the city contract. Staff report?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. The city has tackled weed abatement with a couple different strategies in recent years. I believe at least once or twice, we contracted with a landscaping firm. And we've also last year hired folks directly, full-time seasonal staff. This year, Finance Director Delina and I thought it would be good to try using a temporary employment provider. That would maximize the city's flexibility to bring people on and then find more productive folks if we need to. And we think the price is comparable to hiring directly. So the primary reason that I brought this today is I am expecting that this amount could exceed 50,000, my contracting authority. I don't think it's going to exceed 60,000. But we want to make sure that the council approved me to sign the staffing agreement.
Any questions or comments? Council Collet? And then Councilor Byers.
Yeah, I think you said this, but just to understand, you all did explore the difference between hiring a contractor versus doing this temporary employment, kind of what advantages and disadvantages it would create as far as like management of these temporary staff and the product we'll get out of it.
Yeah, we had several discussions about what had been the city's experience under both of those conditions. We did get, I think, 3 different proposals from 3 different staffing agencies on this type of, approach. Yeah, I think there have been pluses and minuses to both of those approaches in the past, and we thought we should explore this one as well.
Council Byers?
I'm just curious if staff feels like going this route, reduces additional requirements of staff time when it is limited right now.
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, there's administrative burden in bringing folks on, and doing the recruitment. So that recruitment time and time of managing those personnel is significantly reduced.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions, comments? I'll entertain a motion. Council Colley?
I guess for a motion, you're asking for us to approve a contract?
It would be to approve the city manager to sign this. Is it a price agreement? It's a staff. Yeah, so the motion would be to approve the city manager to sign a staffing agreement with Express Employment Professionals for park maintenance laborers.
Okay, I have a motion, Mayor.
Councilor Colley?
I move to allow the city manager to approve a staffing agreement with Express Employment Professionals for seasonal temporary public works employees.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the staff approval of a contract to engage with seasonal employees. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Counselor Foley,
Yes.
Counselor Penemra,
Yes.
Counselor Medina,
Yes.
Counselor Byers.
Yes.
Counselor Prenderle.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mayor.
Thank you, Hector. Next item on the agenda is the city manager's report.
And I must confess, I did not prepare something, and given the late date, I don't want to fumble through doing something on the fly. So
All right,
no.
let's go ahead and go to the police department report. Way to hang in there, Chief Snook. You know, we used to do the department reports early in the agenda. We might want to consider doing that again, just so these folks can get home to their families.
Appreciate that. I don't, other than this report, I've added a few more, information as well. And I know given the late hour, I'll just, if you have any questions on that report, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, it pretty much speaks for itself.
Any questions?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for hitting the thermostat when you came in to make it cooler in here.
Yeah. Any urban renewal activity report?
Given that we did a joint session, I don't think there's anything that I do need to report on.
Commission and committee reports? I'm just going to do it voluntarily since we're so short on time. So Councilor Byers?
So we had a report out by me, the liaison of the Skate Park Advisory Committee, to the Parks Commission about the Skate Park Advisory's meeting with Grindline Skate Park. Did I update you all on that part?
I got,
No.
Okay, so, sorry, because I've done this report once already to Parks. Feels like done it for you. It was a really great, it was a 2-meeting series. The first one was on Zoom with Grindline, 3 associates from there, the project manager, the director of Grindline, and then their primary park designer. And they gave us a good photo with a number of recommendations for their various tweaks on the actual skate park itself. The different skate park advisory committee members looked at all of those recommendations. They had their questions, but aside from really discussing how important it is to preserve the park as faithfully as it makes sense to do so, they really wanted to go and do a walkthrough in person of the skate park and like really like get into the nitty gritty of what all those recommendations meant. So they all asked for a second meeting. We all met at the skate park. I took notes for every recommendation that was on that photo. We went through clockwise and they gave me their input on all of it. And I typed that up and sent it off to Grindline, noting, of course, that all of the advisory committee members were cognizant of the fact that it is a tight budget for that project. I reported their recommendations out to the Parks Commission. Members on the Parks Commission who either skateboard and or snowboard fully agreed with all of the recommendations and supportive input that the Parks Advisory Committee members provided. And they were really excited about a number of just the small adjustments that were requested and asked about. We also had a report out by the grant writer on the additions that are being made to the Old Town, like park of the section, not the skate park section. And they had some good questions just about longevity of the plans. And there is a bit of wiggle room planned into the budget, and it's looking like the numbers that were assessed were pretty on point. So there might be room for some of the small tweaks that the Parks Department requested as well.
Just a clarifying question, if I may. When you say that the skate park committee is making recommendations, you mean recommendations to the construction company,
To
correct?
Grindline.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so, and when you say you're sharing them with the parks, you're not
Mhm.
sharing them as recommendations to
No.
parks, you're just sharing them, okay? Because I just want to make sure that we keep the record.
Yes,
Yeah.
and in fact, I acknowledged like in the Park Commission meeting as well, that this is not an advisory committee to you. It's why I'm sharing it as opposed to someone from one of the Citizen Skate Park Advisory Committee mission member.
Great,
All.
awesome. And it's just to fulfill the contract.
Mhm.
Terrific, and good news. Counselor Collet.
Yeah, just a question for you. Did tree protection come up in any of the conversations? There's a few trees like right next to the Cape Park, but also in the work they're gonna do in Old Town Park. Did that come up at all?
Not really. They're supposed to get started at the beginning of May. But I do think that that is a great piece of input to provide, and I will ask Ted to send that on to them as the head of the Parks Commission.
Yeah, or I don't know if this communicating it to staff that check with them about tree protection.
Yeah, I could take that, Counselor.
Okay, sounds good.
Do
Thank
we
you.
know when construction's going to start?
They're hoping to start the first week of May.
Okay. And do we know when it's going to finish?
No, I don't recall off the top of my head.
I'm just, the Friday night market is something that I think we probably need to talk about. Okay, thank you so much. Anybody else want to report out?
I was just gonna move to extend because I know.
Okay, go ahead.
I moved to extend the meeting, as needed.
Until 10 p.m.
What?
Until 10 p.m.
Until 10.
Well, it's
As-
confined to 10 by the, all right, fine, until 10, so in a minute.
Motion and a second to extend as needed till 10. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
Counselor Brennan,
Yeah.
Counselor Medina,
Yes.
Counselor Byers,
Yes.
Counselor Carmen,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. I'm hoping to keep this on the shorter side if we can. So anybody want to voluntarily report out for committee and commission?
I will.
Counselor Perry Miller?
Just that TPAC interviewed Kathleen, like I said before, and they're super excited to participate in the Fourth Friday Art Walk, which is happening next Friday, April 25th. They're going to be opening the City Hall entryway with local art. And the event will be from 5 to 7 all around talent, with some locations staying open until 8. And other participating businesses are Art Bop, Gather, the Talent Gallery, Sweet Beat. There's so many more. Project
Society.
Space, the Historical Society, Om Sweet Om, Talent Maker City, the Talent Wine Room, and I already said the talent gallery. There's probably more.
Yeah.
Anyways, it should be a great event.
Sounds like fun. Council Collet?
Yeah, Urban Forestry did not meet last week, but we did have a really wonderful Arbor Day celebration. Whenever that was, a couple weeks ago. Committee members were there. We had a good amount of volunteers show up, some people that
How many
were,
counselors attended, Counselor?
how many counselors were there?
Was there a quorum?
It's fun. Oh yeah, you were there. That's right. You were there.
Missed it.
Credit.
How did I miss it?
It was the
It was the
protest in
day of the
Medford.
big other stuff going on. big
It was
protest.
the day of the what?
Protest in Medford.
I think you were busy. That's okay.
I'm,
It went really well.
Video evidence.
how embarrassing.
We had
So
many
sorry.
hands. We even recruited some people that just showed up through the park and they liked what we were doing. There was wonderful staff there. We accomplished all of our goals. So you go walk through the west side of Chuck Roberts Park, you'll see some new
It
trees
looks
and
great.
thank you. And then I was not able to attend the peer meeting last week, but I'm in the process of watching all the wonderful presentations that were given. And we're gonna move forward with some recommendations.
Any other? Just really quickly, my first budget committee with RBCOG is coming up on the 23rd. Okay, the next item on the agenda is other business. And before we do a look ahead, I just want to have one quick item. And that is, I would like to propose that we put recusals on agenda item number 3 so that it's recognition, proclamations, community announcements. Maybe it doesn't, one of these things is not like the other. Maybe not there, maybe as item number 4 and then just cascade everything from there. Yeah, I say that because it would be really good as presiding over the agenda to just do the recusals in one shot and have each member have to do the full recusal if they need to, or declaration of potential, do the full at that point in time and really just point out the agenda items that they're doing it for. So it might be that they have 2 items that they need to do a recusal for, but we can do them all at once. And if it's on the agenda, I will never forget. But sometimes I forget and yeah.
It's one of the things that Casey from OGEC included in her super helpful conflicts of interest information for us, which I
Yeah.
didn't even know that was like something you could do. She said it's up to council's preference, I guess.
Yep.
Is less easy to forget.
Yeah, and if it's on the agenda, it's perfect.
I think that
Counselor
makes,
Polly?
I think that makes sense to me. It seems more efficient and also since, public comment happens there too. And, not that we're responding in public comment, but sometimes people are speaking to a thing that people might be recusing themselves for. It just kind of puts it out there at the beginning of the meeting. So there's
Yeah.
no misunderstanding if you're not here for the whole thing or,
Counselor Penamara?
I have something for other.
Okay.
Yeah, so after the last meeting, I had the opportunity to have a Zoom chat with Andy, let's say his name wrong, McAvoy, who is one of the scientists who's worked on the super popular wildfire maps. That were okay, that I think have already died a death or are going to die a death. But anyway, we were talking about the science behind it. It's science that's been in the works for 10 years and the science will continue. And it's, I think, very interesting what they're trying to accomplish in terms of understanding the risk to those of us who are up against the WUI, the wildland urban interface. So he would be totally open to having giving us like a 15-minute presentation, thinking maybe sometime in the summer after budget, just so we understand the science a little bit more. And I
That's
just thought
great.
that would
And
be cool.
I hope we push that. If we do that, I hope we really let our community know that that's happening because I know there's a lot of interest in our community for that. When you get a chance, Alex, as soon as I get Councilor Perry Miller, I have House Bill 3149 queued up for this. And I will probably ask you to talk about it a little bit. Councilor Perry Miller?
I just, since we're on other, I have sort of a curmudgeon-y code enforcement question. And I haven't been able to talk to Alex about this yet because you're rather new. I have a bit of a issue with rebuilds in the burn zone that are being used as Airbnbs. And I know that it's against our code to have an Airbnb. There's like something about certain amount of time that you actually have to live there. And so I just had a question about like, if there are Airbnbs, what would someone do? Is it a code enforcement issue? Would they go to the planning department? Would they go to the police department? Because I know that that also shifted a while back. And is it anonymous to report people?
Yes, because I don't know who reported me.
So I'm not, sounds like there's a consensus here on the anonymity question. That I'm not sure about myself, but it could certainly get.
I mean, it's just good to know for
Yeah.
people.
I'm almost positive it's anonymous.
I'll
Um,
just say when I was reported for weeds, I was not able to find out who it was.
For Airbnb?
For weeds.
Oh, for weeds.
But the most direct route would be directly to the code compliance officer who is housed with PD. But that, you know, issue could be routed to the city manager or, you know, I think just about any staff member.
I just know that there's several that at least I thought that they had been reported, and then I think that there's sort of just continuing on, or at least it seems like they are. So I don't know, really.
I have a proposal. Oh, go ahead, Counselor.
I was just gonna say, in the past, in my experience from just filling out the code compliance thing, sometimes there's been a follow-up from the code compliance officer, whoever that's been. But that's a really nice thing because, you know, if you see it continuing, you might want to submit another one. So it's good to have some sort of follow-up from the staff to understand if it was resolved or
Yeah.
whatever.
So I just want to say that the Airbnb thing took us a very long time to write that code. And we were really working very hard to preserve our housing in our community. That was really what was behind it. And so there's quite a history to this. And I feel like the council and the planning commission worked so hard on code. And it's really important to really enforce it. And with that said, I wonder if there's room for a policy that suggests that Airbnbs get looked up every once in a while. Because you know, in order for them to run a successful Airbnb, they have to advertise it. It has to be on the VRBO or the Airbnb thing. And if we had a periodic review of that done by whatever department, it would be one of those things where it's a situation that would take care of itself. Is that something that you would want to make a policy for, or do we just, if we don't make a policy, it won't be memorialized. I just want to throw that out there in case that gets any traction. Councilor Penamriff?
I just want to say that my memory is that the code was not as strict as I and Councilor Clark wanted it to be. We were in the minority on that vote. And the planning commission came back with short-term rental a code that would essentially basically prevent an Airbnb because you had to like stay in the house. So you could rent a room or an ADU or something like that. And the council at the time broadened that and relaxed it. And that was what actually got approved. We did work everything you said is true. We did work very hard on it, but I think if this council were to look at it again, it would be stricter than what it is on the books.
Yeah, it allows for Airbnb, it allows you to be away from the property, like I think a third of the year is what it, yeah.
6 months.
Is it 6 months?
Mhm.
Thought it was-
I thought it was a third.
You have to be there.
Sounds like we should look at it.
And this was
Yeah, we
all,
probably ought to look at it, review it. Do
well,
we-
and it was before the fire. I mean, that code
in the-
change was before the fire, and now
Yeah.
the fires happen, and it's just really hard to like watch these
Exactly.
massive rebuilds that are not actually even being used to
Yeah,
house
they're-
people in our community.
For the purpose of literally, hospitality accommodations. All right, well, maybe we put it on the look ahead and someday we review it. In the meantime, can we ask staff to review the Airbnb listings and
I can think of a couple of private citizens that I bet would love to
I think you probably have.
run their eyes over that. But-
So we are preparing, and actually Department of Revenue is reviewing some draft code language for us right now on updating the transient and lodging tax. And it's being written to enable us to get collection through them. And that would give us a much better collection. I'm not sure how much access to data it would give us, but I think it would give us some, so we can explore both of these issues
Built-in
together.
monitor. Yeah, that's brilliant. All right. HB 3149.
Thank you, Mayor. Representative Marsh contacted staff this week and to let us know that this House bill, which would give Phoenix Town schools one more year of additional state funding in recognition of the significant revenue losses that they've experienced as a result of Alameda Fire, has been moved forward to Ways and Means. So it's got a shot. There aren't any hearings scheduled right now. But so I think my request to you all would be to have a more fulsome discussion of it on your next agenda, but also your permission if a hearing does come up between now and the next meeting to provide a letter of support for that bill.
I think that would be just like a consent thing. Does anybody object to that plan? Okay, sounds good. All right, look ahead. Does anybody else have anything for other before we do look ahead? Okay, look ahead.
There, you got some paper to share?
Yeah, if you take, a
Oh, you have it. You
yeah,
have it already. Thank you.
can I give you a copy, Alex?
let's see.
Perfect.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Council, if you take a look at your look ahead, I just took the liberty of adding the budget committee meetings that are coming up next month. It's there are a lot of meetings in May. So I just color coded the city budget committee meetings as yellow and the Tura meetings as a teal or a blue there. And as you can see on May 28th, there are two meetings one for the city and one for Tura, and those are only as needed. The real meetings or the meetings where the most of the work will be taking place is the 7th, the 14th, and the 21st.
Thanks,
I
Nick.
also, we added the times as well, so you're aware of the Tura meetings will be taking place first, followed by the city budget committee meetings.
Anybody? Any questions, any comments? Council Penamara?
So the one on the 7th, so that's before our council meeting, so that's only 45 minutes. I imagine that's just reading. We won't have time to ask many questions.
Correct. That would just be the presentation of the draft.
Would we have access to the budget prior to that date?
Absolutely. Yes, yeah, I'm sure at least a week.
Great.
And so in terms of the rest of the look ahead, the substantive or more policy oriented items on May 7th, I hope to have that transient lodging tax cleanup, so we could also return to this question about enforcement of Airbnb ordinance. We would hope to do a second reading of the public safety fee ordinance, a presentation from Together for Talent on the recycling event. I need to apologize to them. We didn't give them sufficient notice for them to be able to respond in time to get a clear message into the packet for this meeting. your city attorney would like to have a discussion with you all about the Belmont property. And on the 21st, regular council meeting, we have scheduled a presentation from Recology. And then we've got the possibility for some of those topics that are on the back of your sheet. As far as the self-storage and gas station regulation, FYI, we are, Ani from RBCOG has prepared a discussion of some options for planning commission on the 22nd. So that'll take place next week. And we also are working towards a potential public hearing in June to you all if planning commission is able to move forward the recommendations from the Highway 99 corridor plan study. We, as part of that TGM grant, at least DLCD's understanding is there's a commitment from the city to at least consider those recommendations, which I'm sure is true. Their consultant is going to be out of contract by the end of June. So we're going to do our best to if we can, get a presentation before you while they've still got the full team together.
Plenty of stuff to do. Alrighty, anything else? Thank you for the look ahead. It's a great tool. All right, so if there's no other discussion, we will look at written communications. There are none, and we'll adjourn this meeting. Only needed 11 of those minutes. I can reopen the meeting.
Well, I think, I don't think that's necessary, but the thing that I did remember, although I don't have a crystal clear question, during the study session, we did have some conversation back and forth about what the best time and format to return to the gateway discussion would be. And I think I'll just need to formulate a proposal to you all. As I said, I don't have a crystal question right now.
So let the record show that I did reopen the meeting for Alex's comments. Is so if anybody has any questions or comments on that? All right, we look forward to hearing from you. And now the meeting is adjourned at 9:42. All right.
Thank you all.